So
That's a good sign.
Ah.
I'm in a.
let me stay out. Let me stay out of this elephant fight.
Anyway, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us, senior counsel. We
Welcome.
appreciate you taking the time. I don't know if we could start off with our vote. We had asked our listeners this morning whether they agreed with the mandatory ID proposal that surfaced over the weekend and had lots of commentary on social media. And of course, the majority of our listeners and viewers said no, they do not agree with mandatory ID.
Yes.
You have to have an ID on your own time. What's
Yes.
your take?
My take on it is a little different from your trajectory. My angle of nemesis on this is that proposal just has to be a distraction from the real issue. That proposal is a blatant distraction from the issue of the absence of the much touted and promised crime plans, which are non-existent, the bold promises made by this government to address crime and violence in this country, which is absent, and also what has been done in the last 6 weeks that addresses any root concerns about the issue of crime. I say that this is not a novel issue. It existed when the People's National Movement was in power. It existed when the UNC government was in power between 2010 and 2015. You can't blame Fitzgerald Hines. He's out of it now. What has been done to address the issue and the promises made to reduce crime? What it is, take police officers and let them go into bars and see who has a license to be drinking? Let us be honest. The answer is that nothing has been done to engender any public confidence in community safety in the last 2 months. And if you ask what has been done by this government, is it that the proposal, well, not the proposal, the act of summarily dismissing 10,700 CPEP workers, is that part of the crime reduction plan? Or maybe the firing of the forestry workers, or maybe the fact that they're now focusing on URP? Are those going to be the crime plans that have been promised? Nothing has been delivered. What is now delivered, though, and it's working perfectly, because your poll fed into the distraction. So we are now talking about some proposed legislation to come that will deal with people being mandated to have ID cards at bars. So instead of dealing with the dastardly situation that I heard, I hope it's not true, that occurred in Gonzales last evening, they're going into bars to see who has ID cards and who is drinking under the age of 21 and making it mandatory. What happened to the stand your ground legislation? I thought that would have been more important. It is a blatant and obvious distraction, and I say that it is working perfectly well, the smoke screen and mirrors, because it has attracted this very important media house to ask their membership, ask their listenership, do you agree? Well, how about the question, what has been done in the last 6 weeks by the government to reduce criminal activity, to reduce murders, 82 since April 2025? And the answer is nothing. But the distractions continue, and I look around. You can't blame the former government. I admit that this is a problem that existed even when I was the minister in the Ministry of National Security. But now there are campaign promises that were made.
Well, their campaign promise was a timeline of within 6 months you would see a reduction. So they are still within their timeline, to be fair to them.
Well, to be fair to the persons, are you being fair then to the persons who were gunned down over the last week or two, Mr.?
Well, murders, you can't blame murders specifically on the UNC, can you?
Well, I certainly know that they blame it specifically on the PNM. So
Yeah.
how come, Mr. Raghubar Singh, it is okay to blame murders on the People's National Movement and not, and I'm not saying that I am blaming, I am asking, I'm using your argument. How come
Yeah.
it is not fair?
Well,
to blame
ultimately,
murder on
whoever's
the
in charge has to take the responsibility. But to be fair to them, they only there, what, 2 months, 3 months?
Mr. Raghubar Singh.
And they did say within 6 months.
Mr. Raghubar Singh, with the greatest of respect, and this is my problem with the mainstream media, I think that you all use one yardstick to judge the People's National Movement and another yardstick to judge any other entity in Trinidad.
Oh, that's absolutely not true. Not on
well,
this
that
program.
is my respectful view.
Yeah, but your respectful view is wrong. Not on this program, not this media house.
Well,
not this media house. Yeah,
because,
I think that's
because if it was the former Minister of National Security, the headlines would read today: Hines must go. What are the headlines reading today? Let's go and arm wrestle. Mr. Raghubar Singh, we have to be very fair in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, but we've had Fitzgerald Hines. We have had Fitzgerald Hines on this program, and we never said Hines must go.
Well,
we understood. In fact, we have always said, and Wendell has always said that the Minister of National Security is one of the most difficult positions ever in this country. Well, he can never blame whoever is in that position because it's more complex than that.
Well, from the narrative that came out, and if it is that your media house is not one of those that encourages it, I say good for you. But from the narrative, from my respectful point of view, sir, was that every single time there was a murder or a crime in Trinidad and Tobago, the blame was put squarely at the feet of the People's National Movement, and that was, and in fact, and that is part of the course, I understand. But it is not, and I will not feed into the narrative to say that you cannot blame the current administration for the crime situation in some form, particularly when there have been campaign promises made, and particularly when, as I started out, there's been nothing to show that, one, there is the appetite, two, the ability, three, any workable plan at all to deal with this situation. What you do have, and you must only work with what you have heard, is a plan to introduce mandatory carrying of ID cards by persons in order to determine if they have attained the age to drink alcohol. What about persons who say, I don't want an ID card? What happened? You will force them to get an ID card? That will be some very interesting constitutional issues. But what we are doing now by having this discussion is feeding into that narrative that takes us away from the core issue, which is the reduction of crime. I would like to see crime reduced in Trinidad and Tobago because crime affects us all. I do not want to make it into a political football because that is uncharitable. It does not represent what I think the country needs at this time. What I am saying, however, is that promises were made, and you say 6 months, but during that time, sir,
I didn't say 6 months. They said 6 months.
But you have said that they have said 6 months, okay?
Because they said 6 months.
But the grass is growing whilst the 6 months is being allowed to take its course. That is my view.
But MP, you raised something there just now that in our discussions this morning we didn't, and I'm happy that you said it because it's something that should be considered. There are some people who just do not want to have an ID. You understand? They've not had one. They don't want a driver's permit. No. They don't wish to travel anywhere, so they don't require a passport. So there are some people who are maybe just have a birth paper, if so much.
Yes.
And you're right, if I may interrupt, Wendell, you're right, Senior, it becomes a constitutional issue. Mm. But, and if I may, I don't know how to phrase this, but let me say, I have to blame the PNM on a certain perspective for allowing the UNC to get the requisite majority to be able to institute some of these things. So all we have as a check and balance is really the independent senators. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that to this extent. Somewhere along the line, the People's National Movement, before the elections and during the elections, the plot or the majority was lost. The people, for reasons that the people know, for reasons that we know, because the analysis shows that over 100 and I think it's 20,000 persons who would have voted for the People's National Movement in the previous elections, they did not come out and vote, and that is because of the various reasons. But I would call it to say a disenchantment, and maybe rightly so, but they didn't come out and vote. And the People's National Movement was not able to motivate its support to come out and vote.
Well,
In that sense, I would agree with you. But that being said, there are still 13 of us being the elected representatives in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago.
But would you agree? But would you agree that the check and balance really rests with the independent senators?
No. There are many ways to achieve check and balances. There are many ways to achieve checks and balances. And I would say the first port of call, and if you just take it in logical steps, the first port of call is the House of Representatives. And I assure you, Mr. Raghubar Singh, that my voice will be heard. It will be heard as it was heard when I felt that the legislation to deal with the retroactivity of the pension, I felt that it was ad hominem. I felt that it smacked of a runaway singling out of one individual. I understood what was the rationale behind it. I did not agree with the way that it was executed, but they have the majority. But I can tell you, Mr. Raghubar Singh, Mr. Stevens, that they will be called upon to account. One, they will not, and I will not be part and parcel of sitting silently when a majority of 26 plus 2 from Tobago.
Yeah, 28, basically.
Yes, it is. It is what it is.
And that's why I'm saying the numbers, I hear you, and I hear that the opposition will have a voice in terms of the legislation.
Yes.
And you're right that pension amendment bill was ad hominem, but the PNM didn't even stand the ground and say we vote against it. You all abstained. Because everybody abstained. Nobody voted against it, even on the independent Senate bench, which I found curious.
Well, because I will tell you why. There's an aspect. This is not a job for simple minds, This is a job that engages your gray matter, engages your ability to analyze things. And in that bill, there was a part of that bill that was agreed with 100%. And that was the forward thinking of the legislation, which is you prorate your pension as you go forward, because that seems to be the way that the Commonwealth is going. And I will tell you the rationale behind it. The rationale behind it is that in the 1950s and the 1960s, the post and the position of Prime Minister was so revered that it was put up there. Now that is changing because of how the democracy is evolving. And not that the post of the Prime Minister is not as prestigious as it was, but there is a certain pegging down of that, and that is reflected in England, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the prorating now in India to some extent of the pension of the Prime Minister in terms of time that you serve. And in a way, that is logically correct. So in that sense, it was supported, the forward thinking, but in the other sense, It was not supported because of the retroactive nature, and it was targeted. And my point in that is, if you can target a person then with your special majority, then what prevents you in the future from waking up and saying, well, I don't like this radio station. Let me shut you down. And I have the requisite parliamentary majority. And
right. So that calls for vigilance. That calls for
vigilance.
Yes,
and more importantly, Mr. Ragu, I hear my last word on this. I feel very strongly when a sitting member in a parliament can refer to persons who have been placed on the breadline as collateral damage. That gives me sleepless nights, because those are human beings that you're referring to, people with children. And this is where the media, I think the mainstream media, this is where I have a beef with them. What was the outcry against that unpardonable? That is an unpardonable infraction that you consider, and a former trade unionist, a former trade unionist could say something like that and it didn't make headlines? Seriously? I understand, people. I understand. I am happy with the position that I am in, that if after 5 years in politics, all you can say about me is I ride a bike, I eat breadfruit, and I roast a cold pot, I am happy. That's all, You can't say anything else. But
those statements,
says, Mr. Raghubar Singh, that persons who have been fired from their job, one day working, next day not working, and that's collateral damage.
Yeah, absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And we have spoken about it here, and the issue of the lack of empathy that seems to be emanating. But getting back to the broader discussion of that constitutional majority, I've stated on record that I don't believe either party deserves a constitutional majority. And I have always stated that. Wendell knows that. I've always said neither party in this country deserves a constitutional majority. Let them come to consensus if they want to do something that's constitutionally affects or goes against certain privileges that are protected in the Constitution. But because of the PNM, and I'm coming back to kind of blaming the PNM.
Yes, you are.
In terms of however they did their campaign, the UNC now has a constitutional majority. Now, as I said, I don't believe either party should, but they have the numbers. They have the numbers from a mathematical point of view. The only numbers they don't have is in the Senate. And that's why I say the check and balance. The opposition could talk and the opposition could echo opinions and the opposition will have a voice. But ultimately it's a numbers game. And the numbers are in the UNC's favor with regard to whatever. And there's some things that the Constitution needs to change. I'm not saying no. And of course, the independent bench becomes really the substantive check and balance, together with the opposition. Together with the opposition in terms of the Senate.
I have a different. We may arrive at the same final position, but I have a different working out of the sum than you. I start by accepting the fact that in the last general elections on the 28th of April 2025, the country, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, those who came out and exercised their franchise, exercised it in a certain way, and that certain way made the numbers what they are now. That is accepted. The numbers being what they are now, Mr. Raghubar Singh, does not mean that I will accept bullying, ad hominem legislation, the references to human beings as collateral damage. There's one thing in the parliament, but there's the other parliament. There's a bigger parliament, the parliament now of the people, the parliament of the courts, the parliament of conscience. And I'm of the opinion, sir, that in that regard, there is still much to be done. And on the point of the independent senators, I would want to ask you, why do you think in the first instance, the spokespersons of the United National Congress came out and attacked the independent senators. You know why? To make them punch drunk, to make them scared. That is the purpose for what it was done, you know. That
Well, it seemed to have worked.
Listen, exactly. And I saw it and I said, what a strategy. So you come out up front because there was a vote in the Senate as it relates to the TTRA and other things, and they saw the position of the independent senators. And it's really, in a way, it's not really, it's independent in the sense that they're neither government nor opposition, but they're the president's pick. And the attack on the president's pick by the UNC was done to shy them away, to take away what they have, their right and their ability to stand firm on certain issues. So they took in front. Now, whether or not these senators have the wherewithal to understand that that attack cannot affect them because they are not in any way beholden to either side is something that they would have to they would have to concatenate in their own time. But for me, it was a strategy, and it was a strategy, sir, that seems to have worked. I will ask the president pick senators, in other words, the senators appointed by Her Excellency, to stay true to your oath and not be intimidated by those unsavory tactics used by the government.
But MP, you are also using the same term that they use to describe the senators. For all intent and purposes, we know them as independent senators appointed by the president. That's what we've known them as. Why all of a sudden this label on them as the president's pick or the president's senators?
Because, sir, I am not imporous to common sense and to an argument that has an attraction to me. When I looked at it, they have been called independent senators, and that is what they are supposed to be. But if we give them the correct nomenclature, it would be those that have been appointed by Her Excellency. So I am given the correct name, but I would also ascribe to the word independent and ask them to guard that independence very jealously and not be swayed by any commentary from those within or without the Senate.
But I think independent senators will also listen to the House and the arguments that are made in the House with regard to legislation that is eventually makes its way to the Senate. So I think the onus is on the opposition to have cogent arguments and intellectual arguments if they oppose legislation that your grounds for opposing it can hold water and come up to intellectual scrutiny. And I think that's how independent senators will look at it. And the leader of the opposition has said that she will support good legislation.
Agreed. And what I have to say is that the position taken in the House of Representatives is persuasive, but it's not binding. No. But the more persuasive the arguments are, the more attractive they would be to those senators and independent senators who are minded to support positive, well-reasoned, analytical arguments. And I agree with you in that regard, and that's why I'm saying, Mr. Raghubar Singh. So you have now come around to my main thesis, which is all is not lost in the House of Representatives. I understand that the numbers are lost, Those were lost on the night of the 28th of April. I understand that. But you would understand very quickly, Mr. Raghubar Singh, how swift 60 months may pass. So I am not using this as a status quo that will remain, but I am saying that I understand it. And this is my way of working out the sum. The first step is to accept what it is. And what it is, on the 28th of April, the numbers spoke to themselves. 26 in Trinidad And it seems that the two in Tobago have morphed into the government way of thinking.
Well,
It is what it is.
The issue of the president, though, and in terms of that, her appointment will soon come to an end. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this president only has just 2.5 years left, and that's 2.5 years of 60 months. So a lot could change in 30 months.
The appointment of whoever sits in that chair will be the appointment of whoever sits in that chair. They will still be neither government nor opposition. The personnel may change, but the concept and the rationale behind the appointment remains intact. And this is not a system. It is not the first time that we've been doing this rodeo, and it certainly will not be the last time.
I know a couple of people have put in the chat, MP. It's the challenge. Of course, you sit as member of parliament for Port of Spain South. In terms of the challenge with crime and criminality and of course the joblessness and so on in the area that you have represented now. This is now your second term. What are the plans and so on for that to assuage some of the
let me speak now to the constituency that has given me the great pride in Mr. Raghu Barasingh, Mr. Stevens, of representing them a second time. The challenges are multifaceted. I am starting with the impressionable minds because I feel that in the 5 years that I have now, I can make a greater impact on the young people. I will try for all, but the young people. During this campaign, I interacted with young people from Beverly Hills, across Dan Kelly, Picton, Africa, Canada, East Dry River, Sea Lots, St. James, Woodbrook. And they want a chance in this world. They want a chance. My emphasis will be, although in opposition, to demand state resources in order to continue to give them a chance. It's always been there, but the accessing of those chances by the people of Port of Spain South, in my view, was not optimized. I will try to optimize it for the young people. I do not know how the programs will go, the civilian corps, the MILAT, the normal school education. The first part is for them to stay in school and get a full education. Do you know, and I want to tell them, I start also by telling them my story. Do you know how heartening it was, Mr. Raghu Barasingh, that when I woke up on the 29th, I could say, yes, I've gone from government to opposition, but I have a profession, and I have to thank my mother for ensuring that was our only two social contracts. One, make sure you have your education. Two, to be root to your elders. And once I kept that part of the promise, she kept faith with me, and I was so grateful. It didn't dawn on me yet, but I was so grateful. And I want to explain that to them. I want to tell them that we may not, when I hear people like Philip Alexander and they talk about Scotland being being someone who was being singled out and privileged. I wasn't privileged, I come from you can see my ancestral home in Four Roads, Diego Martin. But my mother made me privileged because she had one child and she focused on one child alone. And that is what I want to explain to them. You work within your means, and I want to reach them first because I think that they deserve a chance. With the others, Mr. Raghu Barasingh, meaning the older heads, we have a battle ahead. The battle ahead is clear. They are considered by this regime to be collateral damage that has stuck in my craw. I cannot get it out, I must tell you, because I just can't see how you can refer to human beings who are being affected by your actions as collateral damage and say that you came from the trade union. I want to know what Lyle Townsend may be turning in his grave. And I want to address them. I tell you, with all what little gray matter that I have in the law, I will fight this, what I call summary dismissal of these 10,000 people. I find it unconscionable, Mr. Raghubar Singh, at this time, and those are my plans. So, to concretize it, ask the young people to utilize what the PNM government in the past has put in place. Make sure that they optimize their life chances. I would also have a word with them to slow it down. Life is not running away, but that will be my main foci in that area. And then
I know this is where we're going to have to leave it. I know you had a time limit.
I am always grateful to be on your program. I think I can beg pardon for an extra 10 minutes because I am buoyed by the nature of the discussion, and I think I can do an extra 10 minutes if you would have.
Okay, great. Of course.
Well, in terms of representing the people who would have, of course, recently lost their job and a source of income and so on, a lot of them single mothers and so on. What have you done thus far? What do you intend to do thus in the future to help those same people? That's one question. The other part of that question is a lot of construction activity was taking place by the previous government in Port of Spain South, the social welfare building, the building at the two social welfare buildings, and quite a bit of even housing stock that was also on the cards. How is that to be addressed? Because those things have come to a complete standstill also.
If you're talking about, well, firstly, the building for the socially displaced, which is at the bottom of Old St. Joseph Road.
Yes.
I have not spoken to the personnel who are involved in that project. I don't know, so I cannot say. But I've noticed that there's been no work. It will not surprise me. Nothing that will happen now will surprise me, but I would hope that will continue. That is one aspect. Then, of course, there's the social development headquarters, which is on Victoria Tragway Road, Victoria Avenue. I hope that will continue because both had a rationale. The concept of the socially displaced in Port of Spain is something that affects not only the city, but I think it affects the soul of the capital. And you have persons there who, again, I say they are human beings, and for whatever reason, be it physical, mental, in some cases emotional, in some cases spiritual reasons, they have found themselves in this position, but they are human beings nonetheless, and they would need a start to rehabilitate themselves. And the physical part of it is that they present quite a challenge in the city. If you look at where Royal Bank is opposite KFC, that is by Cipriani statue, you would see that some of they congregate there, and it's really an unsightly it's just an unsightly and unseemly scenario, and you empathize with the persons, but you also want to have your capital city in a way that persons will be attracted to it, and that is why that facility was being built. I think that the rationale is still there for it, and I hope that it continues. I have not yet spoken to the Honorable Minister in charge. As we settle down, I will make inquiries, but my main inquiry, Mr. Raghubar Singh, Mr. Stevens, is the summary dismissal of these workers. That is something that bothers me. One day, you're working, you are expecting an income, And without you doing anything, without you being at fault, without there being any disciplinary infraction on your behalf, without you having cursed a foreman, without you having been late for work, you are terminated. Let us say, for one moment, let us buy into the narrative of the government that the CPEP makeup was the most corrupt ever. Assume, but not admit that. Say all. So the brush that they painted, the broad brush, all. What happened to the workers who went out on a daily basis, and you can see them? You see them in St. James. You see them in Woodbrook. You see them on the Beetham. You see them in Dan Kelly. You see them in John John. You see them in Beverly Hills. You see them in East Dry River. You see them on the highway. You see them in Caratal. You see them in San Fernando. You see them in Moruga. You see them in Mayaro. What happened to them? They corrupt? The silence answers my question. And that is my main beef with how this was done.
I think for a lot of citizens across Trinidad and Tobago, I think a lot of citizens were shocked and dismayed that that was the first actions that the UNC took. Sure. And that affected nearly 20,000 people, because when you add it up, it's close to 20,000 people that were affected by it. And the trade union movement, I mean, the only voice that I really heard was Michael Anisette. Wendell, you could correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Mr. It was the only voice you heard that really spoke about it.
This morning, you are correct. If you have one more, you would have a hat trick. You are correct. The only voice heard was Anisette. And here is the thing. In Parliament, I heard the Honourable Member of Parliament for La Brea, I think, or Point Fortin, speak about the Petrotrin debacle, that's what he called it, and the retrenchment. There's now a committee, isn't there, headed up by a former Minister of Energy to speak about, to investigate the viability of reopening Petrotrin. But the Petrotrin workers, then they receive their severance. What happened to the severance for these workers, the CPEP workers? They did not receive some sort of compensation for time served. They did not receive 1 month's salary or whatever in lieu of notice and their superannuation benefits. The CPEP workers received nothing. I'm very, very sure in my mind that that is an unpardonable injustice. It is. I mean, I
really can't disagree with you. I think that the UNC will have to answer for that at some point, that 20,000 people are without jobs as one of your first courses of action in this administration. It paints it in a very dark way, which I talked about at the beginning of the show, that you felt you were swept into power on a lot of hope and hopefulness. And I always say that you want people to succeed. You want UNC to succeed, because if they succeed, the country is lifted collectively. But when you start off with some of these decisions that they're making and what they are prioritizing as important, it paints a dark and gloomy picture. And that can't be your intent. And if that was not your intent, you need to correct your course. And it's all right to say I was wrong. And you understand, and even though politicians hate to say it, but it's all right to say I was wrong and I need to correct this. I think that gains you much more points than continue on a path that is bringing disharmony and stress to citizens of this country, because they're citizens. These are all citizens you're talking about. These are your fellow countrymen. And 20,000 in a small space like ours is a lot. And so I think it really has to be, I can't disagree with you that it is really something that was startling and disheartening. And I think for a lot of Trinidadians and Tobagonians on social media it was.
Yeah, I was wondering why he was keeping so still. He froze up. Yeah. I think he lost.
I thought he was just keeping quiet because I was making such a great point.
Yeah, I think we lost him there for a bit.
So we'll see if he rejoins. If not, I know he told me that he had to get to court for, so he was going up to 7:45. 7:40. Yeah, he's back.
Embarrassing.
Yeah.
You and Mr. Stevens, you all killed my initial device. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But let me just say that is compounded by the naming or by the ascribing to these persons as being collateral damage. That's one. And it simply means that they do not care. I understand from, and I go back to what I was saying, from that distracted policy that was taken by the Honorable Minister of Homeland Security. Well, we are going to have you that distraction. I expected to be run by distraction, but I will not be distracted from that injustice. Do you know why? School is going to open in a month's time. How do these people get school books for their children? But forget school. How do they feed their children on a daily basis? How do they feed themselves on a daily basis? That's those serious issues. And what gets me in this, there's a certain minister, and I don't want to give him any credence to feed that beast that of an ego, who seem to have taken great pride in that, that is a kind of government, a kind of governance that we have not been accustomed to in Trinidad and Tobago. That's a kind of callousness that I have not been accustomed to, and I rail against that. I will fight that with every sinew in my body, because it is unfair to people throughout the length of breadth of Trinidad and Tobago.
And that's where we're going to have to end it this morning, because it's now 8 a.m. on the dot, and we have to go to our news. So thank you, Keith Scotland, Senior Counsel, for speaking with us this morning.
You all are very welcome. You must ask Mr. Stevens the difference between out of favor and out of favors.
MP.
Yeah, you must, Richard. You must ask him the difference.
And guess what? I'll never run out of either.
Everybody, have a great morning.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Despite all, I'm in a good spirit. Despite all, I love my country. Okay.
Enjoy. We all do. We all do. We love our country. I mean, ultimately.
Ready, show me who ready, show me who ready. This is the time, this is the place, the future is here, no time to waste. We build on the strength of those who trod this road before. Coming again, cause I feel the light, shining so bright in the heart and we soul, red, black and white, together we strong, come sun, come rain, cause it's blood in we veins, we all are the same. You don't know we ready already. Things are set already. Tell them we all in. Don't know we ready already. Things are set already. Tell them we all in. Oh, tell them we all in. Oh, just tell them we all in. Oh, tell them we all in. We under the same sky, feeling the same things. The movement is forward, we all want the same thing. Together we aspire, so we must achieve. Call the Red Army, the whole of TNT. So show them we ready already, the thing done set already. Tell them we all in. Don't know we ready already, the thing done set already. Tell them we all in. Oh, tell them we all in. Oh, just tell them we all in. Oh, tell them we all in. Fire in the soul, a nation so strong. Through the heart of a people, the victory is won. We fight for tomorrow, we fight for today. Stand strong together, blow the evil away. If we are one, the victory is sure. Divide and rule, we don't want that no more. Clean heart, clean hands, it's love to the core. And if love is the word, how about that we show you thunder? So tell them you're ready. The thing is set already. Tell them we all in, we all in, we all in. Don't know we ready. The thing